We have two types of connected conferences. We have the open houses, which are like this one, which are small and more intimate, which are focused on conversations. And we have the connected summits, which are biennial conferences, which are much larger, when we have 500, 600 people from around the world, and we do it like a larger conference would be done. At the end of that conference, we sort of summarized where we were with the state of mobile learning in a video. We're going to sort of open with that video as a way to say, this is when we last met, and many of you were here for that. This is where we were, and that begins the starting place for where we go tomorrow.
I can see where we're headed. It's harder for me to see how to get there. So, for example, I can see increasing kind of the anywhere, anytime, any place learning, but how we get there in a meaningful way is fuzzy to me.
We're in the beginnings of the digital revolution. What I mean by that is that technology is coming into every classroom. I've seen iPods in physical education classes where students are listening to podcasts, and what I predict is that it's going to become so commonplace that it becomes the invisible tool. It's just there.
I really think the most important part from my perspective is that the students are coming to these digital environments with expectations for interactivity. And when they get there and they buy e-textbook that's just a PDF, that's why there's this problem. That's why e-textbooks haven't been adopted thus far.
We are in Mexico. We are a multi-campus university specialized in using technology in the process of learning and investigation. Especially, we have to be open to change, because if not, the next generations are going to go ahead without us.
The days of a single teacher in front of the class with the book is something that's past, and we have the opportunity to greatly broaden the horizons of what our kids have that are up to date.
At Abilene Christian, what we've seen with the faculty who are experimenting with devices is that they're becoming co-learners in the classroom with their students, and students of this generation coming into college right now, that appeals to them. They want to be in a learning environment where they're not just learning with other students, but they're learning with their teachers as well.
At Duke, we're finding that more and more faculty seem to be interested in trying to bring active learning into the classroom, looking at materials that they can use to prepare students outside of class that will let the students really get deeply prepared to come into class, discuss the materials, work in groups, and really engage with the materials more than they had before.
I've been working with mobile devices in a middle year setting since 1988, and it's my very firm belief that in terms of mobility, that every child needs to have their own personal device so that they can learn how to use them properly, educationally, and have that as an augmented learning tool for themselves, and learn how to use that then in their adult life and encourage lifelong learning.
We've been in laptops since there were laptops, and we're kind of getting out of the device business. I think we have to respond to what the students are deciding they want to do and react to that.
I don't think it's settled. I think there's a lot of different options for how this could ultimately end up. But I think that we're at the beginning of a transition of sort of ubiquity of access that's going to enable whole new modes of learning, and I'm really excited by it.
Certainly, I think we are heading towards more of a mobile environment where you should be utilizing devices that are already in the pockets of students. More and more, the applications that are out there are conforming to mobile devices, so that anytime, anywhere learning actually becomes a reality.
The digital world is changing so rapidly. The kids are significantly ahead of us, and so we try to stay flexible, and I think that opportunity to allow them to grow in their manner with the new technologies they roll out that's going to be the best approach that we can take.
We all are carrying around these mobile devices, whether they're smartphones, iPads, iPods, Androids, name it. But if you walk up to a student across the nation and say, share with me the apps or the content you have on your mobile device. They have games, entertainment, how to get to the movies, GPS, but nothing about math or English. We need dynamic content where they can manipulate and become engaged.
What we've done at Cedars is that we try and say yes first and then figure out the details afterwards, rather than say no first and then have people force it through. Times have moved on, and it's essential that the IT department doesn't come to be seen as a source of conservatism rather than a forward-looking department, because there was a time when IT were the people who were pushing the organisation forward, and that time has almost changed. to the point where the IT are now holding back some of the things that we want to do.
What is it we want our students to learn? And let's think about what we're trying to accomplish in terms of getting them to think and be creative and collaborative. And so my advice is, let's change, instead of taking technology and having it change the classroom, let's think about what we want our classrooms to look like, and then let's get the technology that fits that and supports that.
If we're spending so much money on putting devices and the hardware into schools, and even the software, if there isn't solid research on whether or not this is actually working for the students, then it's kind of a waste.
The advice really is you have to, number one, keep the outcomes in mind. It's all really about how teachers teach, how learners learn. Basically, be sure you know what the endpoints are. Keep technology as a supportive thing, not as the focal point, basically, necessarily, of what you're really going to do. If you do that, then the sort of other things that become influences that are dynamic can be accommodated, can be adjusted to.
The funding is an issue, and that's why we're a little bit nervous about how we're going to move forward. But really, I think the future points to a bring your own type platform.
I think that there's a lot of balls in the air. I don't think that anybody really knows what the correct answer is going to be, but I think the appropriate approach is to put the technology into the hands of the students and to let them run with it and see what they do with it, because it's the students who are going to innovate and find creative ways to put the technology to good use.
How do we benchmark when maybe we dance around the edges of that now to say, oh, sure, students are learning, but how do we really know that they're learning? And so by infusing something that's so different, then we really have to embed the assessment from the beginning. I think that's a real opportunity to do that.
I'm optimistic because of the power of individuals, and I think what mobile technology does is it puts power in the hands of individual people.
In real terms, it's the learners that are going to inherit the world. You know, so if we continue to learn and we continue to adopt and we continue to change, then surely we'll be able to adapt to a future that doesn't exist at this moment in time.
So this is where we left the conversation 7 months ago. I'm really excited to be able to pick that conversation up and carry it further over the next day or two. Your participation here, the types of ideas, the energy that you bring is going to help make this a great opportunity, a great conference. We have 104 participants from 2 different countries and a variety of states. We've got a lot of participation from higher education. We've got some participation from K-12. I think those two together make some interesting synergies as we look at how we approach education from different perspectives, but yet we're still at for the same kinds of goals, the same kinds of things internally. It's great to be here. Great to see you. So many of you are back again. It's great to meet many of you that I haven't seen yet. This is ACU Connected. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about what ACU Connected is and why it exists, and sort of set the stage for the conversations and the inspiration that I hope that goes through the rest of this open house. As I said before, this is meant to be conversational. We intentionally keep this small so that we have almost 100 faculty and staff at ACU who are also participating. That's almost a one-to-one, where you should be able to have a lot of conversations with people that work here. How are things going at ACU? And be able to share your ideas with us as we work together to move this forward to the future. So a little bit about ACU. Obviously you're here, so you know that we're about there on the map. You've made it. Congratulations. We're a school of about 5,000 students. We have broad representation from many different countries and many different states. We are a school that sees ourselves as being a forward-moving school, trying to move up in the U.S. News and World Report rankings as a school that's moving up and to the right on the quality place. How are we going to do that? How do we move the university forward? Those are some of the things that we've been struggling with and wrestling with and thinking about. And how does technology help make that happen? How can we use technology as a catalyst to help inspire the next generation of learners and inspire our faculty? I like to begin, as I do with most of my classes, with a quiz. Are you prepared? No? Okay. Well, this is a rather simple quiz. These are your choices. It's a multiple choice quiz. You can say that the things that you're about to see, they can be put in the category of emerging, expected, or obsolete. Okay? So we're going to, as all quizzes do, we begin with the easy one. Emerging, expected, obsolete. Congratulations. Okay, we're going to make this a little bit harder. Emerging, expected, or obsolete? You expect your students to show up in class with a pen and paper? Okay. What about the desktop computer? Maybe not that version of the desktop computer. Do you expect your students to have some sort of computer at their home? Emerging, expected, obsolete? Expected. I know in higher education, I just expect my students are going to get on somewhere somehow to check their email and to be able to do those kinds of things. Where's my math people? Where's my science people? Okay? How about this? For my 10th birthday, this was what my parents bought me. I was this young, aspiring scientist, and if I was going to be in science, I had to have a slide rule. And this was like my badge of geekdom, right? I'm a scientist if I can have a slide rule, trying to figure out how to make that happen. Obsolete. Everybody agree? Anybody still know how to use one? I got mine out of the closet the other day, and I was like, I remember how to, I don't remember how to do logs on anymore. Okay, what about the calculator? Expected? So when did the calculator become expected? When? Yeah? Yeah. When, I don't remember getting that memo that said, oh, by the way, please expect that all of your students have access to the device and change your syllabi appropriately. The pen and paper, how did that happen? I mean, when at some point did somebody say, well, I guess everybody's got one, let's just have people start turning in stuff in paper. We used to use chalk slates. So what about the laptop? Emerging, expected, obsolete. Expected? Do you really expect that every one of your students has a laptop? How many of you have classes in which students all show up with a laptop? Did you give them to them? And there's another interesting thing that's happened out of these technologies is some of these technologies we said students are going to bring, and some of these technologies are going to be provided by the institution. I don't know about your institution, my institution still has computer labs with lots of desktop computers in them. And we made a decision somewhere, this was in my lifetime and my tenure here, to say we were going to put these computer labs in because that was something that we couldn't expect a student to bring on their own. It's just too big and heavy, and pen and paper, I don't supply that. We expect students to bring that, right? Even in K-12 school, we expect students to have their own pen and paper. It's on the shopping list that you get every August. How did those things go into those different columns? What were the things about that? Was it portability? Was it affordability? I think it's portability. I think some things we say are going to be portable, and we expect that to be there. So what about mobile phones? Should that be on the list somewhere? Well, let's look at the data. ECAR, EDUCAUSE ECAR says that in 2010, this data is the latest data that they have. The new data will be out actually at the end of this month. But a year ago, looking back a year before that, 62% of students owned an internet-connected handheld device. And it was growing at 71% a year. At what rate does this trend move from emerging to expected? How long will that take? And at what percentage do we have to have before we can say, I think this is just something that everybody should have? Does it have to be 100%? Is it 98%? Is it 94%? Have you at your institution said, when it crosses this line, we're going to make a change in how we think about mobility? Have you done this with laptops? 89% of students own a laptop or a netbook in higher education 2 years ago. Has it reached the point where we should say, if you don't have one, maybe you should get one, maybe it should be a part of going to college? Some students are going to have the ability to do that, some students don't. Just what are we doing as an institution to make that happen? And what are we doing as an institution to recognize that? Well, how about this one? How many of your students own a cell phone? Well, we know 99% of students in higher education own a cell phone. And my question to you is, how many of those cell phones have text messaging on them? I think they all do. Maybe this wasn't a part of the eCard data, but we know 99% of students have a cell phone. So how are you thinking about using texting as an academic tool? Or are we? Things like Poll Everywhere open up a whole host of opportunities to do polling. Are we still buying clickers when 99% of our students have a clicker in their pocket? How many of those have cameras on them? I think probably, I don't know if you can buy a cell phone today that doesn't have a camera on it. You would have to try hard to find one that doesn't. So are we using those capabilities? If every student has a camera in their pocket, how are we thinking about using cameras in the classroom? How are we thinking of using cameras academically? So I really think that we're at a point where our institutions are going to have to make a decision about these types of technologies. We're going to have to say, we require this and bring it, or this is prohibited, check it at the door, or we're going to encourage you to do this, and we're going to provide some sort of campus-wide infrastructure that helps make use of these devices for those who have it. I don't think that ignoring it is really an option. I think you have to choose one of these things, right? I think largely these devices right now are fitting in the prohibited category. But did you make that decision, purposefully make that decision, or was the decision just sort of de facto because we haven't made a decision yet? Well, of those technologies, which are going to be provided by the student, which are going to be provided by the institution. You know, at ACU, we said, hey, we wanted to accelerate the process. We're going to have everybody an iPhone, but we expect students to bring their own laptops. How is that playing out at your institution? So, you know, we exist on this timeline, somewhere between really old and really new, and we don't really know where we are on this timeline. I don't know where we are in this timeline. It feels like we're kind of in the future. We've got these devices. You can now get a phone that you hold down and tell it what you want, and it responds to you. And you know, where are we on this? Well, you know, our job as teachers is to envision the future. We're preparing students for the future. And it's our job to be the ones to imagine what that future looks like, right? Those students that are in our classes, we've got to prepare them for the world that they're going to grow up in. And what is that world going to look like? What is that world going to be? This is the question that we had at ACU. And we began to think, okay, where can we get data about this? Where's the information about this? And 5 years ago, we began a project preparing for this fall, because there's something very interesting that's happening this fall. On every college campus across the country, the students who are arriving and who are our freshman class were born after the internet was invented. They were born after the World Wide Web was invented. They have lived their entire lives in a web-enabled world. It's always been there. It's like television to me. I mean, I can't imagine the world before television. They can't imagine a world before the internet. It's ancient history. So we're looking at this data, we're looking at the stuff that our students are bringing, we're looking at all the stuff that's coming out of the Horizon reports. There's the Horizon report's an awesome report from the New Media Consortium for the EDUCAUSE. There's a K-12 version of that that's come out. And we really saw three big things that were happening in education. We saw that students were consuming a lot of rich media. YouTube, I mean, 54 hours of YouTube are uploaded every minute. Is that the right stat? How in the world are you going to, I mean, this is growing exponentially. And our students are the ones that are uploading most of that stuff, and they spend an enormous amount of time on that. We saw social connections is a big one, right? What are they doing with Facebook? What are they doing with those types of devices? I mean, how are they using those types of things? They're always connected. The devices that they carry with them are there all the time. A recent Stanford University study showed that 80% of college students who own a cell phone take it to bed with them under the covers. That's connected. It's their social lifeline. It's their social connectedness. If I've got to be somewhere where I'm connected to my social community. If my friends need me in the middle of the night, I want to make sure that my phone is nearby so that we can stay in touch. If I don't respond to a text message, they'll think something is really wrong. Okay? We saw these things really converging into mobility. They want to be connected all the time. They want to be carrying rich media with them. They want to be able to participate in rich media. They want to be able to be a part of the social connections that they're forming through Facebook and other social networking. And as we saw those things coming together in mobility, Steve Jobs comes on stage and says, guess what we have for you today? We have a video iPod. Everybody goes wild. We have an iPhone. The crowd even goes wilder. And we have an internet communicator. And people didn't know what to think about that. What is an internet communicator? And well, he goes on to say, this is the device that keeps you connected to the internet everywhere you are. Through the network, through AT&T's 3G network, you will always be connected to the net. Always, everywhere you go. And we thought, well, this is the emergence, this is the convergence of those three things that we were seeing happening in mobility. So we began a process of really thinking about how would a campus look like when we had access to those types of tools? How would that function? Lots of white papers, lots of whiteboards, lots of ideas. We created a video that was designed to help us think through the process. Later we came back and we defined it as the idea of a video pilot, a video case study. Being able to do a pilot without having to buy the stuff, because when we shot this, there weren't iPhones yet. So we faked it. I mean, we've got a few iPhones in for, every iPhone on campus showed up, and you'll still see we have students hovering around it. But most of the filming is taking place before the iPhones are even there. We're really trying to think about how does this play out on our campus. And through the magic of movies, you can fake all of this stuff. None of that existed. We just said, hey, we're thinking about something that looks like that. We show it to students, we show it to faculty, and they say, hey, I like that, that's a little bit creepy, oh, I really want that. And we're able to sort of do a pilot before we even had to buy devices. It turned out really well for us. It worked very conveniently. And it inspired us to take the next step. Online, any of you teach online? Okay, right, so this is the mantra for online learning, right? Anytime, anywhere. Well, we started, so how does that play out with mobile learning? Well, with mobile learning, it's all the time. You have this device with you all the time. And it's everywhere, because everywhere you go, you're connected. You never leave your online classroom. You never leave your mobile classroom, because wherever you are, the network follows you. We also said, this is something new, because we can now connect you to everything. All that stuff, all the world's knowledge that has been compiled and put on the internet, all that stuff that exists in the academic databases and on the Wikipedia stuff and all of that is there. It's available to our students. It's available to them remotely. It's available to them in the classroom. And what I think most importantly is everyone. Every student in the classroom now has a voice that can participate. They can put their voice into the blog. They can put their voice into the conversation, the minority viewpoint, the majority viewpoint. They're all put together and they're all visible and they're all equally important. Well, this starts to make the idea of a classroom feel a little bit antiquated. If I can learn about everything, everywhere, with everyone, what am I doing in the classroom? What is the definition of a classroom? How does a classroom function? Well, so here's a classroom 500 years ago. When I found this slide, when I found this photo, this image, it made me a lot more comfortable about myself as a teacher. If you look down here in the bottom corner, you see the guy sleeping. It's evidently it's been going on a long time. It's not just me. Up in the top corner, you see these. There's these people back there talking. I really like right in front of them, in the middle row, in the top. There's this guy checking out the lady next to him. There's a lot of that goes on in my classes. This looks and feels a lot like the class I'm used to. Right? There's a teacher in the front. The students are lined up in little rows. Some of them are engaged. Some of them are disengaged. Some of them are thinking about other types of things. Some of them are probably worried about the grades. This is a classroom that I'm comfortable with, and it's a model that's been around a long time. So the question is the classroom the best environment to learn? We all built them. We're very proud of ours on the campus. We'll be happy to show them to you tomorrow. We've invested a lot of money. We air condition them. Is it the absolute best place to learn? Why do we learn in the classroom? So let me just throw some wild ideas out there that have caused us a bit of cognitive dissonance as educators. We're bought into this idea of a college campus, but yet this is John Medina. He's a biologist, does a lot of work in brain engineering, and he wrote this book called Brain Rules. And it's a great book if you're looking for an interesting read on the airplane back. I would recommend it.
The brain science community is certainly not clueless about how the brain works, and it is on the basis of that I decided that I would write. We know, for example, about the brain's evolutionary performance envelope. The brain appears to have been designed to solve problems related to surviving in an unstable outdoor environment, and to do so in near constant motion. I'll say that again. The brain appears to have been designed to solve problems related to surviving in an unstable outdoor environment, and to do so in near constant motion. So it hit me. If you wanted to design a learning environment that was directly opposed to what the brain was really good at doing, you would design something, and you were interested in education, you would design something like a modern classroom.
I thought I had it figured out. Lecture. We all lecture. We love lecture. It's the staple of the college environment. Why do we lecture? Why do we lecture? You know what lecture is? Turns out that it comes from Middle English, which actually comes from Old French, which means to read. So if you were going to the University of Paris or Oxford or Cambridge, one of the great universities, in the Middle Ages, this is how it would work. There is one book, and I have it, and all of you want it. So I will lecture. Page 1, in the beginning, and you would write that down, and I would read you the book, because before the printing press, the most efficient and most effective way for me to get what was in my book into all your books was to read it to you while you wrote it down. And of course you would put your own annotations and your own kind of ideas down, and everybody would have a kind of a different book. It was really about thinking about this kind of thing. We're really interested in how we can write our books most efficiently. That's how the lecture was built. We've been doing this for a long time. It's not a broken system, but it's the most efficient system. So to give you some ideas of some of the things that we've been experimenting with, in fact, Dr. Stephen Baldridge, he's an associate professor in our social work department, School of Social Work, to talk about some of the ways that he's been rethinking the structure of the classroom in an age of mobility.
Sure. Thank you. Whenever I present, last year I spoke at the summit that we had. And I got up in front, and for some reason, as soon as I got up there, I got the worst cotton mouth I've ever had in my life. And I started talking, and I couldn't talk, and my teeth started sticking to my lips like this. And it was kind of like a car that's lost control, and you just can't get it back on the road. And at one point, I got so anxious that instead of saying student, I think I said the word pregnant. And everyone laughed, so I promised myself I would never present again unless there was water within 5 feet of me. And it's sort of my safety blanket to prevent any pregnant mishaps. I'm sure there was a different way I could have said that, but it's out there now. So like George says, I teach in the social work department. And last year, well, to tell you a little bit about social work, back in the day when I was a young PhD student, and by back in the day I mean 2007, I was at the University of Texas in Arlington. It was the second year of my PhD program. And as I'm sure a lot of people did, to help with finances, I taught some undergrad and grad classes as a part of my PhD program. Just to help me out a little bit. And so before you're allowed to teach, you had to go through a teaching practicum where you had a faculty mentor and you co-taught a class with them. And so I had this faculty mentor for this graduate course. And the graduate course was a summer course from 1 to 5 in the afternoon in the middle of the summer in Dallas. And so you can imagine the attention level of the students. Everyone was wide awake. Right after lunch, it was terrific. And so I was expected to teach some of this stuff. So right before the class started, I said to the guy I was teaching with, I said, Norm, do you lecture for 4 hours, or is there some sort of activity you do in the spirit of active learning? And he said, well, Stephen, my theory is I don't do an activity unless it's really blanking impressive. And he said, and I've never seen an activity that is really blanking impressive. Now I'm telling you, he did not say blanking. But I am saying blanking for 2 reasons. For one, because my provost is sitting right here. And for 2, because there's a table of people back there that work with my mother. And so it is in my best interest professionally and personally to censor myself. So, but anyway, that's kind of where I came from. And so I learned to teach class by lecturing for 4 hours. It was miserable, but that's how I learned. And that's kind of where social work is in general. One of the problems I've run into in my research and trying to get it out there and present in these social work conferences is I keep getting my, what I think are wonderful proposals shot down because they're not realistic. We can't give all of our students iPhones. Ubiquity, are you kidding me? And so I keep getting shot down over and over again, and I keep scratching my head. And I was sitting in a room at one of our big conferences last year, and there's about 300 social work professors in there. And they were talking about the problem of technology. And several of them said, well, the way I've dealt with it is I have a shoebox, and when every student comes to my room, they drop their phones in there, and they shut their computers. And then it kind of hit me. I've got a long way to go with this profession. And so, so that's where I started in social work. And then I come to ACU in the middle of this wonderful mobile learning initiative. And so I got to try out a lot of things that I didn't learn about, that I got to do some trial and error. And so one of the things I did was last year, I go to several conferences during the year. And one of them was in North Carolina. And so I don't know, those of you who teach, what you do when you're going to be gone from a college class. You have one of a couple options, I guess. You can put on a video, which may or may not be good. You can give busy work, or you can do, the most popular and easiest thing is give a walk, let them out. But I didn't want to do any of those things, but I thought I have all these freshmen in this room. I have 30 freshmen that all have a device of some sort. And so I said to myself, can I teach class, can I deliver course content on the iPhone, on the iPad, on whatever they had, the same as I can do it in front of the class? And so I didn't tell them I wasn't going to be there. So they all come in the class, and there's my bright, shining face on the screen, Skype, from North Carolina, and they're like, yeah, what's going on? So I tell them all to get out their devices. I put them in groups with the platform that we had at ACU. I put them in groups, and I sent them out on campus to accomplish a task. Now, what we've been doing in the class for the last couple weeks is we've been discussing what ACU was, what your worldview is, how ACU looks different to everyone in the classroom. And so I've been getting a lot of different answers. Some people would say ACU is community, ACU is wonderful, ACU is spoiled, ACU is all of these different things, and they've been kind of trying to justify what they were saying to me. So what I said to them is I said, get in your groups, and you have 45 minutes to go out on campus and prove to me why you have said ACU is this thing. So they would go out on campus, and they would take pictures of it, they would video it, they would use their voice recorder, they would record things, they would interview other students to prove why ACU was community, why ACU was spoiled, why ACU was all these different things. And as they recorded them, they would email them back to the blog, and then they would build this big collection of things that ACU was that they would then be able to go and interact with on the blog throughout the rest of the week. And I thought that worked wonderfully, surprisingly wonderful. And so I asked myself then, I said, I was really proud of myself. I thought, I have found a way to teach when I'm not in class. A wonderful backup to the traditional classroom. That's what I thought, and that's how I was going to kind of market my idea of what I still call remote teaching, because it's not online, it's not even really blended, it's certainly not face-to-face, so what is it? So I call it remote teaching. And so I thought it's a wonderful backup to the traditional classroom. It's a wonderful backup to the traditional classroom. And the more I said that, the more kind of ludicrous that sounded. For instance, in social work, because that's what I know, in social work, I'm standing up in front of my students every week talking about things like social justice, poverty, racism, things like that, and I'm lecturing about it. That's kind of the model that's been dictated to me. Am I so arrogant to think that I have all the information about social justice and racism that my students can learn all that they need to from me, a white guy who has been raised in private school his whole life? Is that real? Am I really the best guy to be talking about how unjust this world is for people? Probably not. And so what do? Well, you might talk about social justice a little bit, but send the students out into the community, see what social justice looks like, document it, and then interact with each other's experiences. For example, send them out in the classroom and say, find something on ACU's campus that is in contradiction to what you think social justice is. And then we have 30 or 40 students in that classroom from all over the world that are showing us what is unjust on ACU's campus. And what's unjust to this person is certainly not anything that this person thought about, but they're collecting all of these ideas when they're out on campus about what social justice is and is not. And suddenly, they've learned so much more from each other in about 30 minutes than I could teach them in a 3-hour lecture with a PowerPoint behind me. And so that's kind of what I started thinking about is not necessarily is this remote teaching a backup for traditional class, but maybe traditional class is a last opportunity or the last-ditch effort when I'm teaching my students. So I just started playing around with a lot of different ideas. And a lot of these things came up because I started thinking, what are some of the things that we can use to teach our students? Why should we develop any of these platforms and apps and all this when our students are already connected by stuff that they use all day, every day? Why am I going to waste an hour and a half, 2 hours of class teaching them to use this really cool app that might or might not work when everybody knows how to upload a photo to Facebook? Everybody does. My grandparents are uploading photos to Facebook. Surely my students can figure out how to do it. And so I started playing around with different ideas. Well, what can we do with Facebook? Facebook, at least in social work, is the F word, okay? We have conferences on how we can get rid of Facebook in the classroom and in the practice and all this stuff. Well, why are we getting rid of it? We already have all of our students joined. And so some things I've done is I have all of my students join a Facebook group and then go out and experience something, and they immediately have a place where they can document what they're experiencing, where they can talk about it, because everyone knows how to take a picture and everyone knows how to click the little thumbs up that they like that picture. And so they can vote on who has the best picture, who they think is the best in the class at talking about something. And then we talk about Twitter. Twitter's something that I've really found interesting, and I'll show you an example in a minute. But I teach a class, Intro to Social Work, where I tell students, go out, find an event in your community where you are not comfortable. Okay? Whether it's a religious service that you're not comfortable with, whether it's a cultural event that you're not comfortable with, go out in it and be uncomfortable and tweet about it the whole time. Okay? So instead of saying what I used to do, go out and experience this. So let's say on Sunday morning or Sunday night, you go and experience this. You know, if it's a traditional Church of Christ student, they go out and experience a Spanish-speaking Catholic church, which is what a lot of them have chosen to do, and they feel so uncomfortable. And then, since class is on Thursday, they wait until Wednesday night to write the paper when the emotion is fresh, right? No, they've forgotten about it. They write it in a hurry, and I'm getting very bland academic answers. But if they're tweeting about it, sure, I'm not gauging writing skills, but I'm getting more rich content if they're tweeting about what's going on. And so that's something that I've done. YouTube, shoot a video, put it on YouTube, send it to the class. That's something really, really useful that students are doing. They love YouTube, and they're using it. WordPress is something that I use in all my classes. All of my classes have a blog. It's somewhere where I can communicate with my students. If there's something I'm thinking about and I'm driving in the car, I can use my voice recorder, I can record it, I can email it to the blog at a stoplight, and it's already up there, and they can listen to whatever I think that they needed to hear. Something else that they do, a lot of them will leave that event that they're uncomfortable in, they'll go to the car, they'll podcast about it for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they'll email it to me. So instead of looking for papers and reading papers, I'm getting more raw emotion from them. Some examples of what this might have looked like. On one of my blogs, here's one of the videos that they put. ACU's community, they uploaded a video. Bringing the world together, I had an assignment to go out and find a piece of technology that explains how technology brings our world together. We talked a lot about worldview. I said, go out and before tomorrow, take a picture of what your worldview is. And so they went and they found out whatever their worldview was. Here's just some screenshots of some of the videos that the students did while they were out capturing different things about what ACU was to them. Here's one of my wonderful tweets. This girl went into a public school cafeteria, which is uncomfortable for anyone, and this is what she tweeted. She said, school social work I like, going to visit kids in school and being treated like a idiot kidnapper, not so much. And so we got to talk about that. Something she probably would not have put in a reflection paper. And so the irony is not lost on me that I'm standing up here lecturing you about what remote teaching is. Because by far the best way to know about remote teaching is to hear me talk about it. No, the best way to learn about remote teaching is for me to remote teach you what remote teaching is. So if you're brave enough, join my Facebook group up there, and then on Friday the 14th at 1 p.m. Central Time, I will take about 30 to 40 minutes, and I will remote teach you as much as I can about remote teaching, and we can play around and have some fun, and it doesn't have to be on a desktop computer. If you have one of these or anything that gets on the internet, I beg you to join me in doing that. So I'll turn it back over to George. Oh, I'm sorry.
Redefining the classroom, redefining the lecture, redefining what we think about education. It's really what we've been trying to do at ACU, trying to think about how we do learn most effectively, learn most efficiently. And making sure everybody's got their photos. Okay, good. Just what did we start off with at ACU Connected? We were thinking about some big ideas. One, we really wanted to think about focusing on student learning, okay? If it's not about the learning, then it probably doesn't need to be taking place at an institution. We're about learning. So we really are thinking about making it student learning. Measuring student learning is really difficult. Measuring student engagement is a little bit easier. We know that engagement leads to learning, so we were going to focus a lot on student engagement, and we wanted to promote university awareness. We want to not be a little invisible school in the middle of West Texas, but a center of thought in higher education about teaching and learning. We were thinking about advancing our undergrad enrollment, not necessarily so much in numbers, but what can we do to bring a better quality student? How do we get better students here at our campus? Create a culture of innovation. This is the most innovative place I've ever been. There are more faculty with more ideas who are willing to tell those to you in hopes that they can do something new and creative than I've ever been in before. And this is a place that continues to embrace and foster that culture of innovation. And lastly, it's a catalyst for conversation about what 21st century learning really looks like. I can give you this device. You can choose to use it. You can not, if you want to use it, that's great. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. But at some point, you need to be able to justify why your methods are better than the other methods that are being proposed by your peers around campus. So as long as you stop to have the conversation about what's the most effective thing for your students, then you're engaged in the process of thinking about how to teach more effectively. So as we think about restructuring learning, this is something that came to us after 3 years of research. We were sitting around talking about all the research, all the data that's come back, all of the information that's come back from 3 full years of having mobile devices on our campus. And we said, mobility is really restructuring the formal learning environment. The classroom that Stephen talked about, that doesn't seem much like a formal classroom anymore. It's really restructuring the way that works. It's also embracing this idea of informal learning. So class isn't something that begins at 8 a.m. and ends at 8:50 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Class is something that's a part of my life, and my life is a part of the class. Those barriers begin to break down. I live the life that I'm studying, and I study the life that I'm living. That's something that it feels like a 21st century learning environment. It sure feels like my work environment. When do I go home? When am I off? You were checking email on your vacations, weren't you? Okay, restructuring literacy. What is literacy in the 21st century? What is literacy in the age of YouTube? What is literacy when we think about a massive amount of media that our students are consuming and creating? What does it mean when we need to think about literacies that go beyond written and oral, but start to include things like video and audio? How are we going to communicate effectively in those types of things as they become more prevalent in the 21st century? We're also thinking about restructuring community. What is our community? Who is our community? How does that work? Does community exist just on this campus, or is community something that can be connected with alumni, that can be connected with professionals, that can be connected across borders, that can be connected interdisciplinarily? I better not say that. Restructuring authority. Do students have a voice in the classroom, and should that voice be heard? That's a great conversation. I think that students have a unique experience, that every student has a unique experience that enlightens the classroom and the topic that we're here, that we're talking about, the topic that we're here to study. So how do we rethink about what the role is of the teacher in the classroom? What is the role of the student in the classroom? Are students capable of bringing content to share with their peers? Is a teacher capable of being a coach rather than the stage and the sage? What we did, moving into the more technical pieces, if you're an ACU student, when you come to campus, you get a choice. If you want an iPod Touch, you can get one at no cost, and it's contract free. If you choose an iPhone, and 2/3 of our students choose an iPhone, then you're obligated to be a part of the contract that you signed to get the iPhone, a 2-year AT&T contract. If you want to choose an iPad, this year we had a new option. Students were able to receive a $300 discount on the choice of an iPad. Of those that didn't choose the iPhone, a majority of those did choose the iPad. We definitely see it as something that students perceive as valuable. Inside Higher Education kind of summed up what I would have wished that I would have thought about before we began the Connected program. Is we really want to see ourselves as sort of a petri dish to explore the intersection of technology and learning. We accelerated the process that we could get immediate data about how mobility was going to affect education and how mobility would affect each of the disciplines that we teach at our institution. I really like that idea of thinking about that idea of a petri dish. In the biggest, most broadest picture possible, what is ACU Connected? To me, it's the vehicle for the future. It is what will take this institution from the strong institution that it's been in the 20th century and propel it to be an even stronger institution in the 21st century. It's our way of saying we're going to embrace the future and we're moving forward. It's going to look different for a lot of different people. It's not going to look the same on any two campuses. No two campuses have the same culture. But for us, it was a vehicle that we could select that would move us there. That's what we're here to do, is to have conversations about that, to explore this together, to open up a dialogue, a conversation that goes on over the next 24 hours as we think about what the future of teaching and learning is. This is ACU Connected Open House. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to have the more conversations with you tomorrow.